All right, everyone. This is Orlando Ferrer with Informed Decisions. Thank you for participating in today's webinar, Make Reports from Your IBMi Easily. Today, we're going to keep this to about 20-25 minutes tops on the webinar, and we'll have a 5 to 10 minute questions and answer session at the end of it. Along the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to use your question or chat box that's associated with your webinar tools on your screen, and we'll answer those as we go or at the end. We'll see how that goes. In the meantime, as we get started, and it looks like we have a couple more joiners in here, let's today's objectives are going to be basically to show you how to generate and make reports using your IBMi and how to make that easily beyond a spool file report. And we'll talk about that and get into those details. I'm going to give you a quick couple of views of the logic behind this, and then we're actually going to jump on to the system and show you how that setup goes along and show you the end results of this whole process. If you don't, give you a 2-second bit about Informed Decisions. For those folks that are new to us, we have been around on the IBMi platform for over 20 years. We handle document management software, and we do archiving and retrieval as well. We are been around in this arena for a long time, specializing in checks, archive and retrieval, document management, and a few other areas as well, all surrounded around the IBMi. So with that being said, along the way here, let's just get started. So we're going to start off with a spool file report, very commonly used spool files. And a lot of folks just print their spool files directly to a printer, and you get the data, and that's kind of it. What we're going to do in today's session is we're going to take a spool file and maybe a not so perfect spool file that doesn't have the data exactly where we need it. So we're going to manipulate that spool file, and then we're going to set this up so it goes off to a engine, what we call the iDocs engine, to process through. We're going to do all sorts of things with it. We're going to take the logo, dynamically insert that into the document. We're going to actually give it 2 different mappings where we take the data and tell it where to go on the page. And we're going to take actually that the mapping and do it on 2 different versions of the document for different purposes, and we'll show you why and how along the way here, and as well as taking different boxes and designs for the different pages along the way. Finally, we're going to actually end up with this document out in the archive or retrieval system, so people in your network can actually look at it online. And at the same time, we're going to take that document and distribute it out using our smart routing capabilities in order to show basically get these documents over to your recipients. In this case, we're going to email these out. Now, one cool thing is that we can actually create these documents and get them out there in different ways: HTML, Excel, PDF, all sorts of different ways. Today we're going to pick on PDF, as this is a commonly used way of getting documents out. Why we should do this? There's always a purpose, and I hear it a lot of times where people ask me, well, I can print my documents, and okay, yeah, they print the spool file and they get data. So why do I want to mess around? Why do I want to, what I call, beautify the actual document? Why do I want to have it? Well, there's some actual tangible reasons for this. There's some good reasons. One is the audience, and you want to make these documents easy to read, and you want to make them functional along the way. So if you have a data on a sheet that prints out that's just data, well, it may not necessarily be easy to track or follow a column or follow where the ship to is easily, and or any of that stuff. It just makes it a lot easier if we can actually add some color, boxes, highlight some areas specifically to draw the eye to those documents, which will improve that person's capability or the audience capability to reading that document. Accounting-wise, right to the bottom line of the books, basically, get paid on time. Documents that are easily read are fast, quick to get processed. You can find them easily. It speeds up audits along the way if you can actually find your documents easily, which the audit the archive and retrieval system will help do along the way. So accounting is going to benefit for this, which actually equals to getting money quicker along the way and being able to process, being able to find things quicker. Your marketing and sales side of it, man, they're going to love it. Marketing, logos and branding are big. Being able to get your company name out there, and branding the company name is always a topic for the marketing folks. And then your sales guys, a lot of times it's easier to refer back to an invoice, a packing slip, or something that's already gone out for repeat orders. And of course, the sales side, they're looking to get new orders. So all these things, and there's actually a whole bunch more in there, just, what they boil down to, as far as the finished document, when you go from printing from a regular spool file to a finished document, well, you're going to get better efficiency and productivity, which all that translates to is money. That's going to be actual more money that you can make and that you're going to be able to save by having some finished products out there. In today's example, we're going to do, I just want to give you the basic logic on how we're going to process this. This is actually something that we're going to do for non-programmers. The target to do this is non-programming folks that can configure the software to process and this whole setup and actually get what they want. So most normal times we can actually take data from a database or a spool file. In today's example, we're doing it from a spool file, from an accounting system or ERP system, depending on what you're using for in your business or kind of combination. And the logic is simple. It starts from, as you can see on the top left here, where we're going to actually monitor an out queue. We're going to do a test of that spool file to make sure that, hey, that's the spool file we want to work with. We're going to take an action. We want to do something with that spool file, right? We maybe want to evoke a merge process, maybe we want to manipulate it, and then we're going to send that off for a handoff. And that's the whole logic through this whole process. So we're going to do that with the smart router, which is going to manipulate the original incoming spool file, because there's going to be data in there that doesn't appear in every page, and we want that data to appear in every page in our example. So we're going to show you how we manipulate that. And we're going to hand that off to the iDocs engine. The iDocs engine is going to look at the spool file, do the test, and it's going to evoke a form merge, which is basically taking the data on the spool file, processing it to merge the form applications. In this case, we're creating two different form applications, processing it with a form set, which will create two different pages per packing slip in our sample, with different designs and mapping. So, and then it's also going to, at the same time, evoke smart routing, which will automatically, based on the triggers that we've set up, to actually email out our output as PDFs. In this case, we're going to be looking at a database to find out where our emails are. So we can actually, I'm going to have an external database that I'm going to query automatically with our form applications that will pick up those emails based on the customer number. And lastly, we're going to work with iView, and that's going to get the next handoff. And iView is going to monitor for that spool file to come in, take an action. In this case, the action is going to be to process that that information that we receive in there and create it into a PDF, send that PDF to a repository for storage, create some metadata tags, in this case the indexes, which will get populated into the iView front end. And instantaneously, or just about instantaneously, that's going to appear and be available to you folks inside, which now they don't have to get an email. If accounting folks need to find something, they can just go online and find it instantaneously without junking up their email boxes or them having to take any action to store it later. It's all automatically stored. And once it's in the iView front end, then they can email it forward, make a copy, do all sorts of things from there. And this is the whole process, and this is the logic. So we get the spool file, we do a spool file test, we take an action, and we're going to hand it off. And we do that for all three parts: the smart router, iDocs engine, and iView. The next couple of slides, it just kind of shows you some more details on breaking that down. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, as this is far more detail, but it just tells you more of the out queues that we're going to be messing around with and how we spread that out, and just the logic behind it. Again, it's just a repeat of that same logic over and over again to get to the very last spot. So with that being said, I'm going to go right into our iDocs main menu on the green screen here. And the first part I'm going to show you is working with forms. And we're going to start off with basically creating the forms. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today on designing. We'll have other webinars to show you on designing and mapping, but I am going to give you a little glimpse of it. So I have a form in here that I've created and designed already, and this is only one of them. This is actually one of the front page, or page one. Second page is going to look slightly different. You notice there's not a logo in here. I actually inserted that differently with a different macro to appear on our form. And so we can insert that, and what that means is for different companies, I can have different logos. So I can have company A, Division B, Division C. Maybe they all have different logos. Well, I can dynamically insert that logo into the form application using our iDocs software conditional text and macros that we have set up. In this case, I just want to show you a little what a designer does. Normally what we do is finish our design, print to the iDocs driver, and the iDocs driver receives the design. We actually download the mapping for this. In this case, I'm just going to show you the rendered mapping on this. So this is a spool file that we brought down. Here's all the mapping that we did. And this is dynamically. We picked this all from the spool file on a drag and drop type of basis. So I can take this and just drop it down and manipulate it where I want that to be. And then I bring this up to the IBMi iDocs software. In our case, because we're concentrating on today's efforts on showing you how to configure the report, we're going to be working at this level. So we have two form applications, one for the first page and one for the following pages. And what I did was create a form set. A form set is a way to conditionally say what form application we want to use. In our case here, we actually said, let me go down to it here so you can actually see it as I speak. It's this one down here. We've actually said for anything that's on page 1, and we're going to find page 1 on row A between columns on column 78, then use this form applications, which is for page 1. Otherwise, use the default. And this is a simple Boolean test that does this. And what that's going to do is always give us the page 1 to be a very certain look with the mapping that goes along with this, and then followed up by a default for the following pages. So let's say we have our form applications ready to go. What we want to do next is work with our smart router. That's option 13. And here we have I have a setup of a smart router that's already active, and we're going to actually show you how that's set up. We're monitoring an OutQ called in under my library, and when those spool files go in there, I'm going to actually do a spool file test that's actually going to show, let me just show you this here. Here's the actual OutQ that I'm monitoring. Go in here. I'm going to actually take a 6 to do my spool file test. I'm actually going to do a test for the spool file, and this is my value that I'm testing for. So if that's a true statement, then that's the actual spool file that I want to work with. And next, followed by the target. And the target is always very interesting. The smart router can manipulate all sorts of different things, from adding spool file attributes to adding text to adding all sorts of stuff on multiple levels. And so this has tons of capabilities. In this case, what we're going to do is we're actually going to take in the original spool file. We're going to manipulate it, and I'm going to send it off to this OutQ right here called Smart Hold. And I just created that, and it's called it Smart for Smart Router, and I'm just going to hold it there for the next process. And when that new spool file goes into Smart Hold, it's actually going to get burst by the customer number. And I'm going to show you where that all happens here. So the second part is also I'm going to actually take the quote number, which is also different. Originally that appears on page 1 and out of this 4-page spool file that I have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that and insert it back into the new spool file at a location where I know there's no data, because I'm going to need that information to appear in every page, so when I output the information, I can actually display that on my form. So in this case, I have a map field on my form application that's called quote right there, quote number. And I'm taking that and I'm saying, take this information that you find on the first page, and you're going to insert it starting on row 6 to in column 60, and that's where it's going to put it in there on every single page. At the same time, on my form applications, I have customer number, and I've told this map field, or right here called customer number, to burst. So when I actually go back in here and say burst the output to the smart hold out queue, it's going to burst that information or it's going to burst that spool file, and it's going to insert it into the smart hold as burst spool file. So what that means is if I have two different customer numbers on that spool file of 4 pages, then it's going to split that off appropriately. It's going to have one spool file for one customer number, a second spool file for the second customer number, separating each one of those. So you can actually have a spool file with hundreds and hundreds of different customers, and the bursting will separate each one of those to deliver those targets separately. That's Smart Router. The next process we're going to work with is the iDocs engine. I'm going to show you how that works. In this case, we're going to go down here, step through it. Oh, did I pass it? Oh, here we go. I did pass it, sorry. So we're going to look at this here. And in this case, we're doing the same thing. And this where the next handoff was looking at the smart hold out queue for my spool files to come in. I'm doing my spool file test. I'm selecting my form set, which I've set up already, and I'm going to actually tell it to go look at the form applications for where I want this to go out. And on the form applications, go down here. These are the form applications. I actually have smart routing configured. And what that does is I actually have a physical file called Happy under my library, and I'm going to say look for my email addresses under email in that database file. And what that's going to do is going to, every time it sees a it's going to go through there. As for the output, it's going to look at the key, which is the customer number, and if the customer number in my database matches, it's going to look under this email for the email address. So it takes that that output and emails it out to that recipient. At the same time, I've configured a basic default display of that email, what the customer is going to receive. In this case, I'm going to have them go out and say on the subject line, here's a copy of your packing slip, because that's the form that we're using today, and just a little message as well that I wrote up in here for that customer. So let's get out of that because that's all configured. So that's just a look so far. I'm manipulating the spool file, the bursting, adding the quote number into the new spool files, handing that off to the iDocs engine, having the iDocs engine merge that data with the spool file information, trigger smart routing to create a separate emails with PDF attachments to send that off to the customer. So that's the distribution part, creation of the merge forms, and then what happens next? Well, we want to look at this stuff instantaneously on our iView front end. So we're going to show you how we set that up, and that's number 12, iView. The iView applications and the engines work the same way like we talked about before. So if I actually went in there and showed our engines that we have in here, that's it right here. I'm just going to select that in here, and you'll see we have the the outqueue that we're going to monitor, our spool file test, and the application in iView that we're going to be working with that gets triggered to merge with the spool file. Go back here a second. I'm actually going to show you the iView application, which is this one right here, and you notice I keep the naming conventions the same or similar. In here, we actually have it real simple, and like I said, this is all this is something that a non-programmer type person can just configure. We've actually taken this. We're going to create a PDF. And in this case, I want the PDFs to have a specific naming convention. So I'm going to call it the name of the application, pack slip. So we know, hey, when I see a PDF called pack slip, I know that's a packing slip, the date, and I'm going to actually add some more information. I can actually add more. In this case, I want index 2 to appear, which is going to be the invoice number. So my PDF will be, I'll say pack slip, the date, the time, I'll say the invoice number dot PDF when I look at those on my iView front end. The second one is I can add indexes. I can add a whole bunch of these. So far, I just only added the date, invoice number, customer number, quote number, sold to, shipped to, and these are things that are pretty basic that people can look up. I'm selecting them from a spoof file. I'm actually giving them a different type of data. In this case, for the date, I want that to be a date data, and for everything else, it's just going to be regular just data that I'm going to accept in nearest text. But what this is going to do when it processes through, it's going to create that PDF. It's going to index all these fields to make it available. This is something that we can take the metadata information from and actually hand off to different people if we wanted to. Or different processes or archive retrieval systems. Then with that being said, the resulting spoof file will go into archive queue for future use. And if you look at it, we'll go back here for a second. All that stuff that we talked about just now is this process right here. We looked at Smart Router. We actually going to process that through. The action that's going to be is basically we're going to burst it. We're going to take the quote number, insert it onto row 6 and column 60. We're actually going to burst that on the customer number, and we're going to hand that off to Smart Holdout Queue, in which case the iDocs engine is going to perform the spoof file test. It's going to hand that off or evoke the actual merge process of the form set, in which case it's going to send that off and distribute off via email, that finished product, and then it's going to get handed off over to the iView process, and it's going to evoke at that point that process, which will index and create PDFs for the repository. So with that being said, I'm actually going to show you this live and the whole process and the way it's going to happen. I have all the engines already turned on, so if I did a work active job, you'll see that my engines are already, I have those processing and ready going here. What I actually have going in here, workout queue, I have my spoof file, which I have on hold, ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the status on that to release, because I want that ready when I actually let go of that. And then I'm going to move this over to my originating out queue. At this process is going to go to my in out queue. I'm going to move that over. And what you're going to see is when I hit enter, I'm just going to refresh. The spoof file will return in here as hold, because at that point, the smart router process has occurred. And then it's going to hand it off to the next one. So I'm going to hit enter, refresh, and it's already back. It's a very quick process. If I look at my work after jobs and I do a refresh in here, I'll start seeing that the process is getting picked up by the first line there, which is my iDocs engine, and it's already running and it's processing through. And then the next process on that is going to be my iView engine, which will get picked up, and that started the process as well. And that's just going along the way. So with that being said, let me bring in my emails and let's see what we have. Okay, so I already have one of the emails that has come in. Actually, these two are like my earlier tests this morning that I was doing. It's always good to check your work before you actually do a webinar. But in this case, this is the email that I received. Here's my little message. That could be more extensive. Here's the output of the PDF of the first one. And notice I gave it some color. I have my logo that appears in here, which then it wasn't part of my original design. So this is my original design. Right? It's not in there, but it's in here because I've dynamically inserted that logo onto this form application. I've actually added a couple of highlights in here as well, boxes, logos. barcode for the invoice numbers and PO numbers to make it easy for scannables. And then I've given a nice big note section for the first page, and then following up with the actual packing slip information. And the ships with, I want that to be highlighted because I want, folks packing, taking care of this form. They know it's going to ship with more information, more folks, and more things going out there. So I want that to be highlighted. This just makes it easier for people to understand the form, the data I'm trying to communicate to them, and make that efficiency possible. The second page, just notice, is different from the first design. I'm going to make that a little smaller. First page, second page. I've made this different to incorporate more data into the body of this actual form. And then given the actual bottom, some information for the packing folks to actually sign off on. So that's a little easier to read than just a plain spool file, which may just incorporate this information, but people have to actually figure out where it is. They look at it, data. It wouldn't have the barcode. So just by doing this, it just improves the information. And there's my quote number that I wanted to appear, because originally that only appeared on the first page. So now it populates in every other page. Okay, and notice this is for customer number 3619. For our example, since I don't have multiple email addresses, I send it again to myself as a second person, but that could be anybody. And here's my information for customer 3620. And again, it uses the proper design and mapping for each page design on this. Okay. Now that went out. The next part is that we want to look at is, let's look at our iView front end. This is the iView front end right here. I'm going to log in, and this is where your folks in accounting, maybe purchasing, maybe a sales folks can go in here and look at the forms instantaneously. As a user, they wouldn't see all these. I'm signed on as an administrator. They would only see the archives. In this case, I would go to archives. Here's my packing slip. I'm going to bring this up, connecting, and here are all the different values I can search on, all right in here. I can search by date, I can search by invoice number, all these different features in here that I can search on. I know I don't have a lot in there, so I'm just going to do a wildcard. I'm just going to select everything. I have some actually ones from earlier today that I was messing around with, but you'll see these last two are the ones that I just did. And if you look at them, I can take a quick glance and see that, oh, here's my customer for 3619, and here's my customer for 3620. Again, the PDF is going to have the name, the time, the date, and the actual invoice number that I associated that creates a PDF. Now somebody in here can say, oh, oh, you didn't get it, you didn't get that back. You know what? Let me email it to you. They come in here, search for it, get it, select the email option, and they can email it off automatically as an attached PDF to that person. They can also annotate it as well. So if there's notes that we want to add to this, or I find this is useful for accounts payable, folks and receivables, they can add in here saying, Jackie received the packing slip. And they can annotate this. They can say, yay, or add it on there, and now that becomes part of that document or associated in there as part of that archive or retrieval package. So somebody else can go back in there at a later time and see, hey, let me see if there's any annotations. Oh, there is. Jackie received it, and it has a timestamp on it. So this is real useful to make these documents available to folks instantaneously. The nice part about it, again, it's not clogging up email inboxes by sending a copy of these emails to people, because a lot of times they may not need the actual documents, and they're going to have to find them and research them. Well, why do that when you can just have it centralized and people can look it in here? And this has all sorts of capabilities in here. So if I wanted to find in here customer 3619, right, and I went, oh, I think my account number ends with 19, right, I can do that in here, do a search, and it brings up any account number, any customer number with 19 on it. Or I can go in there and say, I don't want this. I don't want this to be case sensitive. I think it begins with city as an example. Or the ship to, because I think the ship to is what I was saying. I think it begins with some sort of city or something. Well, I can do a search on that. It does some practical searches on your system in there, and just brings up, oh yeah, city of Cool. That's who got it. So this whole process is in there. And again, this is all something that a non-programmer type person can actually do on their own. So with that being said, that's the whole process on creating um, a, um, report easily right from your IBMi and taking it from the process of generating the documents to print, email, fax, they have it in different contents. I know today's example we use PDF, and that's all we had in there. So this is something that can be done with the iDoc software. Now, if you want more information, I know we're drawing into our last little bit of time here, but if you want more information, please feel free to give me a call. My name is Orlando. Send emails to info@informeddecisions.com or call in at 949-709-5838. Option 2 will get us to you some answers. And of course, visit our website. Just tons of information in there as well. If you have any questions, use your chat boxes and or questions to actually answer any. I'll answer any questions that you have in there. So give that a second in there to process through. Oh, okay. Somebody just sent a question in. They said, "Well, what did the original information look like?" So let me show you the difference on what it would have been like if that information was just printed out. So let's just go in here. I'm going to do this on the fly here a little just to show you. Archive. This is our email product, and I'm just going to send that off to myself as a PDF so you see what that information would have looked like. Okay, and that's a good question because it's always good a comparison to see what, you know, I don't know, I'll call it basic view, basic spoof file. And that's going to go into my inbox, so we'll wait for that to come in there. Right in there. So this is going to appear in there. So when that comes up, I'll pop that up in there. In the and that's processing along the way. In the meantime, just know that I hear this all the time from a lot of folks. It is extremely valuable. Oh, here it is, by the way, basic spoof file. It is really valuable for folks to understand documents. So this is what that spoof file looks like. And as you can see, it just has information and data. It has some basic, titles and tags. But would you really able to, if you're looking at this quickly, well, yeah, I got to figure out of this, out of this pile of information here, which one's oh, there's the PO, and then I got to relook at it. So it could be a little more cumbersome. It also doesn't have the barcodes. It doesn't have the branding that the sales and marketing guys have. It just adds a little more oomph to your documents, and it helps a lot of different areas. The other one is we could take this document and archive it as well, just the way it is as a spoof file. We can save it. On the other hand, it's a little nicer when somebody can call in, ask for maybe an invoice, a packing slip, a bill of lading, a copy of it, any of those things, and actually be able to, somebody can go in, do a quick search on those, and actually send out a nice finished product that's finished, that actually has a logo, that's in color, that actually that means something along the way, and is actually a finished product with all the different pages. So that's something that's valuable in there. Somebody asked another question in here. How long does it really take to go through that whole process? Naturally, in the first, form or two that you do, it's going to take a little longer, but you got to understand what you want to do. But the mechanics are really easy in that sense that the logic is going to follow the same across the board. Take in your data, check your spoof file, take an action, and pass it off. That's the whole logic behind this. So somebody like I said, that's a non-programmer can take action on these. Okay. Okay. Well, I don't see any other information in there or any of the questions. Again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. I know we're at the end of our 30 minutes. If you have any questions, again, feel free to send questions at info@informeddecisions.com. I thank you very deeply for your participation, and keep an eye out for more webinars. Thank you.